A while back, I was working with a client who, by pretty much every measurable standard, was incredibly intelligent. She had a great career, she had several degrees, she was very analytical, and she could solve problems really quickly. People relied on her. And when it came to her relationships, though, she felt really stuck because she knew something was wrong and she knew the way she was being treated didn't feel good. And she could even describe certain patterns that she knew were bad, like gaslighting and blame shifting, projection, and emotional withdrawal, things like that. So she could explain all of this. But each time that she tried to leave or create distance between her and the ex, she got pulled right back in. And the thing that bothered her the most wasn't just the relationship itself or the fact that she got pulled back in. It was the question she kept asking herself: how can I be this smart and still be stuck here? If you've ever asked yourself that question, today's episode is for you. Welcome back to the Be a Better You podcast. I am your host and subconscious reprogramming expert and mentor, Allison K. Dagny. Now, people think staying in toxic relationships means that you're weak or that you're naive or that you're dependent or you ignore reality, put your head in the sand, that sort of thing. But that's usually not what's happening at all. Often the opposite is true, that people who stay the longest are frequently the ones who think deeply, analyze everything, take responsibility, believe problems can be solved, are committed to growing, right? In other words, smart people. You probably recognize yourself in these categories. Now, intelligence can actually make it harder to leave. Here's why: because smart people are really good at finding explanations. So when something feels wrong, they don't immediately walk away. They investigate, they try to understand it, they analyze their behavior, the other person's behavior. They're considering context. They might even be asking questions like, what happened to them in their childhood? And oh, maybe they're under stress, or maybe there's something I could do differently, or maybe I misunderstood, or maybe we just need better communication. This is where intelligence starts working against them, because instead of leaving the situation, they keep trying to solve it. And one of the things that I talk about in my upcoming book, Hack Your Mind, Heal Your Heart, which comes out on April 21st, 2026, is that our minds are constantly trying to make sense of what we experience. The brain hates unfinished stories. It needs to fill in the gap. It wants explanations and it wants resolution. But sometimes that drive to understand can keep us stuck inside these patterns that aren't healthy. Smart people often believe they can fix the situation. So intelligent people tend to believe things like, well, if I just figure this out, I can improve it, because they're used to solving problems. So when the relationship starts to get difficult, the mind goes into problem-solving mode again. But toxic relationships aren't math problems, okay? They're pattern problems. I love patterns, okay? But you cannot solve someone else's pattern for them. Intelligence does not override subconscious programming. If this is the first time that you're tuning in, the subconscious mind runs 95% of the show. It runs how you behave, it runs how you feel based on what you believe, what you've been programmed to believe. Okay? So one of the biggest misunderstandings about human behavior is the idea that if we understand something, we will automatically be able to change it. But that is not how the mind works. Your conscious mind can understand something perfectly. That's the knowing part, right? But that's only running 5% of the show. Your subconscious mind runs all the emotional reactions that come because of what you believe in that 95%. And all those patterns are what formed most of the time in the earlier years of your life. Okay, so things like fear of abandonment and rejection, needing to prove your worth or earn attention or affection, believing that you have to earn someone's love and affection, maybe being responsible for other people's emotions or believing that you are, and people-pleasing patterns. So even when the logical mind, that's the 5%, that's the conscious brain, even when the logical mind says, this isn't healthy, this isn't good, this is wrong, this is bad, the deeper programming says, stay, try harder, fix it, work on yourself, be this, do that, right? That's what the deeper programming says, because it's being driven by all those old programs. And this is one of the reasons that I wrote Hack Your Mind, Heal Your Heart, because so many people think that they're stuck because they don't understand what's happening. But in reality, many people understand it very well. The issue isn't that they don't understand it. The issue is that the subconscious mind and those patterns keep replaying the same emotional responses, because it's like a robot, right? If a robot is programmed to serve you all the time, if it has programming that says you have to try harder every single day to be loved, you have to do more all the time to get attention, you have to do all these things, right? Well, what do you think the robot's going to do? It's going to do what it's programmed to do, which is the same thing that you're doing. Your brain has a set of systems of beliefs that has been programmed throughout your life. And you will continue to behave in ways that match that programming unless you get in there and reprogram it. Okay? So smart people, intelligent people, often take too much responsibility, right? Really thoughtful people will say things like, what did I do wrong? Or what could I do better? Or how could I improve a relationship or this situation? And often, it's because these people are mature, right? And they want to make things work. And it sounds mature too, but inside, toxic dynamics, it is dangerous. Okay, so when you're in a relationship with a toxic person, it is dangerous to think these things. What did I do wrong? And what could I do better? Right? When you're with a narcissist or you're with an emotionally abusive person or a toxic person, those kinds of questions are not the questions that you should be asking. But an intelligent person is typically going to do that, because manipulation really works by shifting responsibility. So if someone is mistreating you, they're going to put all the responsibility back on you to you fix yourself, you change yourself, you get help, you get better, you get on medicine, you change, right? That's how manipulation works. It's not them saying, hey, I realize I screwed this up and I'm sorry and I need to work on that, right? That is not what you're hearing in a toxic relationship. They're saying you're the problem. So the person who is the thoughtful person in the toxic relationship, you, right? You keep adjusting yourself while the other person never changes. Okay? The other part that I want to mention here is intermittent reinforcement. Confuses the brain. You know what intermittent reinforcement is? It's when somebody's nice to you and then someone is not nice to you and then give you little breadcrumbs of nice. They're really, really horrible to you, and then they do something really, really kind. And then they repeat this pattern. That's intermittent reinforcement. It's keeping you on edge, and then you're like, oh, but they could be better. Oh, they have so much potential. Or, oh, maybe they're having a bad day, right? So toxic relationships really don't feel bad 100% of the time. That's what people don't realize. They think, oh, it must be fights and, punch walls and screaming matches. And no, not at all. They don't feel bad 100% of the time. And if you're not experiencing physical abuse, and emotional abuse is even like that too, right? So emotional abuse is you're on eggshells, you're worried, you're constantly doubting yourself, you're feeling bad because you've been criticized or put down or verbally abused, right? So, but then you'll go out to dinner and with a bunch of people, and you'll get all the praise in the world about how amazing of a mom you are, how amazing of a wife you are, and you're so great, and blah, 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 right? And you're like, oh my gosh, what is this? This is intermittent reinforcement. So you'll get love, connection, maybe apologies, vulnerability, and feelings of hope. And so those moments create powerful emotional reinforcement in you, and your brain goes, see, it's getting better, right? So then you stay longer than you probably should. This has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with how human attachment systems work. And that's really important to recognize. Now, this is important too. Smart people want closure. Okay. And that doesn't mean that people who aren't smart don't want closure. Okay. I'm just using these as I'm assuming most of my listeners are highly intelligent people. Okay. Most of the people that I've spoken to in my root cause calls are highly intelligent people. They know what's right and wrong. They have thought. They have analyzed. They have considered. They have tried to make changes on their own. Right. So analytical minds want a clean ending. They want clarity. They want to understand why. They want to close the loop. But when you're in a toxic situation, when you're in an abusive relationship, these things rarely provide explanations that can give you that or that will satisfy you in that way. So your mind keeps circling the situation, trying to solve something that doesn't have a logical answer. But your brain wants to find the answer. So, people who don't have a high level of intelligence may not do that. Now, here's the thing. There is another episode that I have, which is episode 43. So if you scroll back, it's called The Closure Myth, Why You Don't Need It to Heal from Emotional Abuse. It meaning closure. Okay. So I find that a lot of people want closure, but once you start shifting your subconscious beliefs about it, you don't need closure anymore. So, the reason it's not just because you're intelligent, but it's also because of what you believe, right? So you're going to circle, you're going to analyze, you're going to try to figure it out to get that closure. But also if you shift your subconscious beliefs, then you don't need it. So episode 43 will go deeper into that if you want to go back. If you're somebody who's like, I do need closure, I need an ending, I'm a smart person, I'm analyzing all the things, okay? And one of the themes in my book, too, on the new book coming out in April, Hack Your Mind, Heal Your Heart, is that healing doesn't come from solving every single piece of the story. It comes from changing the patterns that your mind learned from the story. Okay? The patterns are important. Looking at the patterns of your life. Maybe you were somebody who was always solving problems as a kid. Maybe you were somebody who was always trying to, get closure or get a connection or, come back together with somebody if you had an argument or whatever, right? If you believe that, we should always be nice and we should always have good relationships, right? I'm going to challenge everything. Anything that you tell me you believe, we're going to question it, okay? That's what I do in my one-on-one programs, and that's how I help people change their lives. Okay, so if you've ever looked back at a relationship for yourself and thought, how did I stay there so long? Right? That question is really, it's just simmering in self-judgment. But the truth is, the qualities that kept you there, right? Your intelligence, your empathy, your ability to analyze, your willingness to work on things, your willingness to be self-aware, right? These are not flaws. These are amazing characteristics and traits that you have. But those qualities just got pulled into a bad dynamic where the other person was either unwilling or unable to reciprocate. Okay? So healing requires you to shift. It requires you to shift from analysis, right? Because you've heard this phrase too, analysis, or what is it? Paralysis by analysis. That's a real thing. And that's similar to rumination and all the things I talk about on this podcast. The more thinking that you're doing and the more analyzing you're doing, well, you're going to get paralyzed by that. You might not take action. You might stay stuck in a relationship that you really shouldn't be in. Okay? So we need to go from analysis to pattern interruption. First, you got to recognize the pattern too. But then we interrupt that pattern. So instead of asking, why did they do that? You start asking different questions, right? What pattern is causing me to respond this way? What belief am I carrying that keeps me trying to fix things when I should really be exiting? What did my mind learn about love when I was a kid and now that I'm using it in this situation, right? So we have to get into the patterns. Pattern recognition is super important, right? Not just patterns of how other people behave, but you and the patterns that you've taken on. Sometimes the patterns run like automatically, and if we're not aware of them, we can't change them. Okay, so intelligence, just as a final wrap up here, intelligence doesn't protect you from unhealthy relationships, okay? Some people think that, oh, really smart people, they would see it, they would know, they're not going to get trapped. Okay, well, I have a bachelor's degree. I feel like I'm a pretty intelligent person, a decent IQ, and I still got fooled by a narcissist, okay? So sometimes the very traits that make someone thoughtful, capable, analytical, intelligent can keep them trying to resolve issues far longer than they should. Just like my client that I talked about in the beginning, really, really smart woman, and kept getting pulled back, okay? Healing doesn't come from becoming smarter about the relationship either, okay? It comes from changing the patterns that your mind learned over and over and over and over again. All right. If this episode resonated with you, my new book, Hack Your Mind, Heal Your Heart, goes much deeper into all of this stuff and how to actually interrupt the pattern so you can move forward differently. It's going to be available April 21st. So if you're interested, you can go to my website, www.allisonkdagny.com. This is my book website because I have two separate websites. You can go to that one and you can put in your email and be notified as soon as it's available. All right, before we wrap up, I just want to say something to those of you listening who may have seen yourself in this podcast episode. If you've ever looked back at that relationship and wondered how you stayed so long or why you kept trying even when you were hurting, I want you to know there's nothing wrong with you. The qualities that kept you there, these wonderful qualities, these wonderful characteristics, that you work on things and that you're smart and you have empathy, these are not weaknesses. These are beautiful parts of you. And they just got pulled into something that was not good for you. And so you can change these patterns. And when you begin to understand the deeper programming, then everything starts to change. And you get to respond differently moving forward. So thank you for spending time with me today. I'm really grateful that you're here and that you're doing this work. If today's episode resonated with you and you're curious about uncovering your deeper patterns that might be driving your reactions, book a free 30-minute root cause call with me from the show notes. And we'll look at what's really going on beneath the surface. We can identify your patterns, things that may be keeping you stuck, and see if maybe one of my programs could be a supportive next step for you. You can find the link to schedule in the show notes. Until next time, thanks for being here and take care of yourself. I'll talk to you next week.